Alright, it was Friday when I read this. Hopefully you guys see it soon. Here we go. Yeah, okay. Next is number 2, the next Delta Trike. A much improved Delta Trike with 100 miles per day potential. For anyone who saw the videos about the Delta Trike, yes, it actually is working very well lately. So far at least, right? As a first rolling prototype, it exceeded all of my expectations. But as you've probably already figured out, it's not quite perfect. It is insanely heavy. I did the best I could with what I had available. Well, actually, I just welded together some parts that were from previous other experimental bike projects. So there is a lot of room for improvement. The next one will be more bicycle parts based and not using motorcycle wheels, for example. I'm looking into a better source of metal for the frame. I don't yet have a TIG welder or a practical place to actually do TIG welding, so the more exotic metals like chromoly or aluminum are off the table for now. But even if I do stick with mild steels that I can weld with my flux core wire feed welder, I can at least use thinner, smaller steel pipe or square or rectangular tubing. If someone does want to send me a TIG welder, that would be nice. Thank you. But I'd still need some kind of a shelter to keep the shielding gases from blowing away. Details do matter. The basic Delta Recon trike that I built already works, so I will be mostly copying those dimensions. However, I desperately need to add suspension. My trip to town is about half gravel and half paved, so 12 or 13 miles of each on the round trip. It's 12 miles each way. I'm pretty uncomfortable by the time I get home. Sure, some more seat padding would probably help, but I'm much more worried about the rest of the bike taking that pounding. I mean, my own parts rattle, but parts like the batteries, the electronics, all the welds will not last forever on that road. Even the truck I used to have showed a lot of wear after a few years. I've seen mountain bike shocks that I can get for about $30 or $50 per shock. So I could do a shock on each rear wheel and then put a set of front forks with suspension on them, and we'd be set there. That would make a huge difference. A lot of the original Delta Recon frame was leftover parts from the Blue Bike Electric Trike project, and even a good chunk of the original Turtle chassis. I grabbed those because they were already welded and battle tested. So that got me into a rolling prototype much faster. I probably saved several months of work by doing that, so no regrets. Also, because it was so overbuilt, I didn't feel like I had to worry about it breaking. Nothing worse than having something structural break when you're 10 or 20 miles from home, or 500 miles from home. That trailer that broke coming out of Death Valley still reminds me of what happens when you get it wrong. So the next Delta will be similar looking, but I'll set it up with 29-inch mountain bike tires and wheels on all 3 corners. It'll use electric bike motors and controllers instead of the motor I used on the first Delta. That was made for an electric go-kart. I'll cut a lot of weight on the chassis, and it'll have suspension. The first Delta was very much too heavy to pedal more than a few feet. Whereas the Giant bike, Giant branded, it is also a big bike. The Giant bike that I bought on the trip last year, I could pedal that home with a dead battery and not feel too bad about it. It is, after all, a bicycle. I'm also planning to upgrade solar panels for the next Delta. The prices on the 170 or 175 panels are coming down since I bought the 100 panels I have now, the 100 watt panels that I have now. The 100s are showing their age, and they're not putting out full power anymore. They're usually only rated for 1 or 2 years anyway. They don't last forever. So we cut the weight, make more efficient choices in motors and wheels and tires, double the solar panel, and suddenly the new Delta could actually solar cruise. I'm calling it solar cruise. Basically, I could ride efficiently at a speed that I have more solar coming in than the power I'm using. At the moment on the Delta, I'm using about 10 amps at 12 miles per hour, which is the max speed, but I'm only getting about 3 amps coming in. I'm only making it to town and back now because I have a really big battery. The solar helps a little bit, but it's not nearly enough. With the bigger panels with 340 watts coming in, I think most parts of the ride I would be using less than 300 watts on a much lighter trike. On the Giant, I'm used to getting to town easily at 100 to 200 watts, and that's the same 29-inch bike tires I'll be using on the next Delta. So that seems like it'll work. I've been experimenting with the tires on the Giant, and I found some really nice gravel tires that work very well. Very low rolling resistance. I've been looking at prices on things like pre-made carbon fiber parts, like round or square tubing, which I could use on the solar rack. They're expensive, but the money I will spend on carbon fiber would offset the money I would spend on more solar or more batteries. So it actually seems like it's worth doing. Make an investment once and you get the payoff continuously. So the next Delta would look similar in design to the current Delta, just adjustments and tweaks made on pretty much everything. I can borrow parts from the Giant for mocking up the suspension. I already have plenty of batteries, which are the more expensive parts. I'll probably use motors and controllers I already have, at least for testing. I do not want to cannibalize the working bikes, but might not need the first Delta for much when I get the next one built. I've spent a lot of time looking at how other people have built things, like race cars built in the garage, and I've picked up a lot of good tricks. I never had a proper flat and square reference surface to start from. That would sure make things easier to do measurements from. In the beginning, I didn't even know what I didn't know. Now, I do know what I don't know. That's a huge improvement. So that's the direction we're looking. I've spent a few weeks learning CAD and design so I can make a good start when it cools off enough. It's honestly not a lot of fun out here in the summer, especially outside with long pants and shirt sleeves welding and grinding. I think summers are a good time to be out riding somewhere far, far away. Winters are a good time to be back here building and welding. The reason I bought the ranch in the first place, it was an inexpensive place to build my base camp, a place to come back to at the end of the adventure. This was not a place I intended to actually stay at long term, and now you know. Oh, and the next idea is the really fun one. You'll want to be sure you are subscribed so you don't miss it. Okay, bye for now. Man, who wrote this stuff? More tea. Hey, we're doing good.